Yes.
Welcome, wow, that's really loud, to the January 28th meeting of the MCCSC Board of School Trustees. We ask that you please come to order. This is a time set aside to celebrate members of our school community. Mrs. Harmon, could you share that with us?
Of course, thank you. Thank you, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and Board of Trustees and community members. It is my pleasure to share a few highlights of the month's Celebration of Success and Equity Spotlight Award winners. The Celebration of Success is a feature of every regular Board of School Trustees meeting. It recognizes the achievement of MCCSC employees, students, and volunteers who make a difference in our school community. For the January Celebration of Success, we would like to recognize our first year Hoosier Hills Career Center students in the culinary program. We had 28 students receive Serve Safe Food Manager certification through the National Restaurant Association during semester 1. Serve Safe is the leader in food safety training and certification. This certification will allow students to work in restaurants, catering, food trucks, and opens the doors to further responsibilities and job opportunities related to food safety. The Equity Spotlight Award recognizes students, faculty, staff, student organizations, schools, and community partners for fostering inclusive environments that reflect the MCCSE mission, vision, and core values. The January 2025 Equity Spotlight Award recognizes Emma Ford, the school social worker at Rogers Elementary School, for her outstanding leadership and dedication to promoting inclusion and belonging within the school community. As the chairperson of the school's equity team, Mrs. Ford has made a significant impact by equipping faculty and staff with resources and strategies to ensure that students and families of diverse cultural backgrounds and abilities feel supported and included. She has also coordinated guest speakers, provided training opportunities, and worked to ensure that all languages and cultural backgrounds are represented within the school environment. Thank you, Mrs. Ford, for embracing diversity and always going above and beyond to foster a welcoming environment for all students and families at Rogers Elementary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon, and thank you to all of those who were recognized tonight. We would typically now proceed to public comment, but seeing that we have none, we will move on to the consent agenda. For our consideration are the following: memorandum for executive session on December 2nd, 2024, minutes from the board meeting held on December 17th, 2024, minutes from the Board of Finance reorganization meeting, public hearing, and special meeting held on January 7th, 2025, ECA expenditures, overnight or out-of-state field trips, the financial report from December 2024, appropriation balance report from 2024, register of claims from January 28th, 2025, payroll register and payroll claims from December 2024, and the request to declare as surplus and authorize disposal of out-of-date items. Do I have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next, for our consideration are the donations. We have received donations of over $3,000. Thank you to all of our donors. Your generosity is, as always, greatly appreciated. Do I have a motion to accept the donations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ashley and seconded by Tiana that we accept the donations as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the donations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We now move into old business. For our consideration is the final reading for 3 policies: 1200 administration, 3210 professional staff, and 4210 support staff, staff ethics, and professional conduct. Is there a motion to adopt policies 1200, 3210, and 4210 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So interestingly, so I think we have a motion and a second to move into discussion on these policies as presented. So we'll move into discussion at this point. Aaron Wyatt. Sorry, Karen, thank you.
Yeah. So not to spoil the fun, but my plan is that I'm going to make a motion to table the vote on this. Not because I don't think it's wise to have this policy or that I have any specific objections. I just like a little more time. I think that the first reading was in December, and if I'm honest, I didn't at that time appreciate the breadth of the change, that it's not that it's moving from an ethics policy that only applied to administrators previously to applying to all of the staff in the corporation. And I think the only other semi-significant change is an addition of bullet points that clarify the text of the policy. And some of the things that are in those bullets are things that I would like a little more clarification on. And so for me, I don't feel ready to make a vote on this tonight.
And yeah, and I'll just say I agree with Aaron about mainly the bullet points, and yeah, I would just like to have some more discussion, and I appreciate information on it. It's just some of them seem vague, and I would just like some more clarification of what some of these things mean, and do they mean just in the context of school, in the context of their home, teachers and administration, and so I would just like us to have more conversation and not just pass this through if possible.
Yeah, I wonder, is there conversation that you'd like to have now? I mean, are you prepared to discuss at least to some extent so that I think the rest of the board members who maybe didn't might have some insight into some of the questions?
I just want to make sure that the administration. Oh, sorry. Go
I
ahead.
do not have a second for this motion to be brought to.
Well, we're just in discussion. We haven't made a
I haven't
motion
made
to
a
table
motion.
Okay,
yet.
thank you.
We're just only in discussion.
I just gave away the punchline, but I haven't made a motion.
She said she was going to make a motion to table, but she has not yet. So at this point, we're just in discussion.
Well, and I don't want to surprise any of the administration that's working on this. I just want to make sure this is an appropriate time to ask some of these questions, or if we should do it in another format and talk about it more later. I just want to make sure.
We are more than happy and well prepared to answer any questions that you might have about any of the three policies that exist, that are being proposed. And that would be Dr. Henderson and or myself or any members of our team.
And so, again, I'll just go right into some of the things. Number 6 says using profane or abusive language. Is that anywhere all the time? Like, I'm just curious. What's the con? Yeah, to me it just reads as like if I, slip and fall outside my house and someone hears me and I maybe say something I shouldn't. Can I get in trouble for that? As a teacher?
Dr. Henderson, would you like to take that first or would you like me to?
I'm happy to. Thank you for your question, Mr. Scher. As the board knows, the policies that we have in place apply primarily to the work environment. And when staff members are performing their duties with their colleagues or when representing the school corporation at events or functions that are related to their roles, right? I would have to say, however, that the policy could apply outside of school with profane or abusive language if it was directed toward a parent, directed toward a vendor, directed toward an administrator, directed toward another employee, not during the workday. So there are limitations. If you smash your hand with a hammer and utter a curse word in response, that is not my area of purview, right? So
where is that in this document? What you just said, where is that context in this document?
yeah, I think there are other policies that support this policy. So when you look at this policy and how it crosswalks with other policies in the corporation, there are certain items that are not necessarily covered in this policy. In other policies, there are some areas where this policy overlaps with other policies, and then there are some policies where further, more in-depth definitions of behaviors are explained. But this policy then kind of compiles all of those things into one location where It's an easy point of reference for a staff member in any of our 3 job classifications, whether it's administration, whether it's professional staff, or whether it's support staff, as a point of reference to then look at, is this behavior appropriate for me in the work environment?
But this policy does stand on its own, right? It's its own policy.
It does stand
So
on
it
its own.
could, in theory, like, you could use this policy not with the context that you gave me, and someone could be punished for something that's, because it's not clear in this actual policy.
I would say that administrators are always charged with the responsibility to make ethical decisions with regard to their own behavior and the way that they treat other people in terms of their behavior. And to that extent, everything that involves the termination of employment ultimately requires the board's approval.
Yeah.
So an administrator couldn't act unilaterally to fire an employee.
Yeah, I know.
There would have to be a case made, and the board would have to approve that.
Yeah. I just, as a board member, don't want to be put in a situation where I have to make the decision based on something that I think the context could be fleshed out in this actual policy. Because there's one that says dishonesty. I mean, I know what that means, but I mean, I don't know what that means in this context. Like, am I just like the only one struggling here?
No, I mean, having raised the motion, I think this is a good example, and also said that I feel like I need more time. I think this is a good example of something that I think we might want to look at a little more closely before making a final decision. I also wonder if we can be more clear about which of these items apply when you're acting on behalf of MCCSC, and which of them might apply when you're acting in your private life. I personally would like the opportunity to look at some other policies from other organizations and see how they compare. I'm honestly not sure if it's too vague or too specific. I can see an argument for both. And I'm also worried, as Brandon said, I think that the way this would impact us as a board is if we are called upon to consider a case where someone's brought an appeal after having been penalized in some way. And so I'm trying to look at this and say, if I was called upon to agree or disagree that someone had acted unethically, could I use this policy to determine that? And for me, I'm not prepared tonight to say that I think this is ready to be approved with no changes. I think possibly minor changes, but I think this is a good example of why it's not ready to be voted on yet.
Okay, so I definitely hear potentially more specificity, or maybe not, depending on, but it might take a look of redefining or rethinking.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can write an ethics policy that is so specific that it doesn't leave room for any ambiguity or subjectivity. I
Right.
think that is part of a policy like
Absolutely.
this. So I'm not, I don't, and I don't want to speak for Brandon, but I don't think either one of us is looking to write a policy that leaves no room for judgment. I think that's not possible.
I just, to be honest, I mean, I looked at a handful, and I just, this one looks, I'm just curious where this was drawn from. I know there's a lot of hard work in it, but I just have never seen some this vague and open, so I'm just curious. Maybe I'm not reading the right ones. I couldn't find any others that look this open-ended like this, especially without the context in the specific policy of where this pertains.
One thing that I might add to that, Brandon, as you've said that, that comes to my mind is the administration that wrote this policy has in mind of how they would administer it. But if a subsequent administration interpreted it differently, is there some issues in there that could be interpreted differently to generate an outcome that wasn't intended?
I think that's a good point, Ross, actually, that I hadn't actually considered, but knowing that administrations do change, and I do think that that's a key point, that while this administration might do it in a certain spirit, we know that our policies remain for quite some time beyond us, and so I do think that that is an interesting point, and then might require some specificity on where those things can or can't be applied or something like that, perhaps.
Something about those lines related to work, not related to work.
Sure.
And I don't know where this line is. I know there's definitely a line, but like I know that discussion happens with the union, but it would be nice to have a sense of where the union, how the union actually supports this and feels this, since this is going to impact their members and all the teachers. Again, I don't know how that works. I don't want to cross any lines, but that would go a long way, I think, for most of the board if they knew that the union fully supported this.
I am curious, and I do believe that our attorneys looked at this policy, but we did pass a policy last year that said that before we passed a policy, that might impact teachers, that we would have input from MCEA, and I think Dr. Winston, you have had that input, but I don't know if we as a board also have to allow that for that input before we can pass a policy that impacts teachers.
So what we've agreed to as a corporation is that although the state of Indiana has repealed the requirement for discussion, because of the collaborative nature that we have with our MCEA and other unions, we continue to discuss and have done so endlessly. And in this respect, we have had 2 discussions, both in December and again in January, with our MCEA counterparts to discuss the contents of it, the principle behind it, and have in fact received, at the December discussion, we received supportive feedback from our MCEA members. At our January discussion, there was some additional feedback that was provided, wherein there were a couple of recommendations about providing some links to corresponding policies, and we've certainly looked at that and identified some potential policies that we would link in so that folks would have additional frame of reference. I would certainly defer to Mrs. Harmon for more specificity about the conversations during discussion with MCEA. To be able to provide some additional clarification. I know that there was one other consideration and issue that was brought by MCEA during the January discussion that I can't speak to explicitly, but I think Mrs. Harmon or Dr. Henderson could speak to.
We were both present during the discussion with MCEA on this policy, and I think, so feel free to jump in, Dr. Henderson, if you'd like. They did indicate support of having a policy as well, and did talk about a desire to kind of do some crosswalking with other policies and and link other policies in that might provide definitional information for some of the things that you're referencing, like the bullet points or some of those aspects. Do you think that captures it, Dr. Henderson, or did I miss something?
I think there was one specific line in the policy that raised some concern, and that was a line that speaks about conduct that offends the morals of the community and who that community is and whose morals we're talking about, and some fear that certain groups or individuals might take that line and pick that line to attack an employee because they don't agree with their lifestyle choice or whatever the reason might be. We talked about how we have other policies in place that protect individuals, recently passed policies, anti-racism policies, the LGBTQIA policy, that also serve to protect individuals from being attacked in that way, and someone leveraging this particular line in this policy to be a point of attack on someone. We talked a little bit also in the AFSCME discussion session about some of these items, and talked about the fact that a policy like this also protects an employee from being treated poorly by colleagues or being treated poorly by administrators, or protects administrators from being treated poorly by colleagues. So the policy works in both directions, right? The policy could be a policy that could warrant a disciplinary consequence for someone who violates it, but it can also serve as a means of protection for an employee who is being mistreated by someone else.
Would a potential update to this policy be to add references to overlapping policies that provide some protection or counterbalance?
Gone through board policy, had some suggestions of where those things might overlap from members of MCEA. Took a look at those, and there are some policies that indirectly are related to this. There are some policies that are pretty closely related to this. Tried to distill that list down to a reasonable number of policies that are most applicable to this one. Have come up with a list of 8 policies that are most likely to be cross-referenced to the administrative policy, 8 policies that are most likely to be cross-referenced to the professional staff policy, and 7 policies that are most likely to cross-reference to the support staff policy. So we've done some preliminary work in identifying those things. We're just unable to make a modification to the way the policy was presented in first reading to second reading. So if the board tables that, we're certainly amenable to the idea of going back and placing those cross-references in for further consideration.
When I do the thing I'm going to do next, that shuts down discussion. So does anybody have anything they want to say? Okay, I'm going to make a motion to table the policy. I lost the number. Do I need it to make my?
It's 1200, 3210, and 4210.
I think there's 3 of them, right? I'm going to make a motion to table policies 1200, 3210, and 4210.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Motion by Aaron, second by Brandon. So we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of tabling until some modification can be made to the policies, say aye.
Aye.
Any no? Any abstention? The motion carries and we will table that.
So just for purposes of myself and my administrative team in clarity, it would be very helpful, in addition to providing the corresponding policies that we can very easily cite within each of the 3, are there other areas of clarification or additional detail that the board would like to see represented in an updated version of this policy? That would be very helpful for me to get clarity on what you would like to see so that we can represent that adequately.
Can I also ask a follow-up question? Would that be something? Well, no, let's go with that.
For me, it would be something that Dr. Henderson said earlier that other policies have as far as the context of where this stuff takes place. I also think, this is just me, but I think the A through I do a pretty good job of sort of generally saying what we want of our staff and students and our staff and protect the staff from things too. I just, the 1 through 16 just makes me nervous just because they're so vague. Again, not all of them, but yeah.
Thank you for that, Board Member Scher. Would a definition of dishonesty or a definition of profane or abusive language, would that additional level of clarity be of assistance?
I mean, I think if it's in the if it's clear what the context is, that if it's connected with school students, like that kind of stuff, if it's encapsulated in that, I think that would be helpful. There are some, like dishonesty, I struggle with that one, not because I'm not, I like honesty, but I do know that we're all dishonest all the time. And again, I think this idea that Ross brought up, that, you all have good intentions, the next administration might not have good intentions, and they could literally fire someone for being dishonest in any context, and that to me makes me just nervous that we would pass something like that.
So, if I'm hearing what you're saying, in these cases, it's not so much a definition, it's an application of context.
Yeah, and some of them I think I just have a hard time with them being in here at all, but that just might be me.
Well, for instance, dishonesty, I'm going to use your example. Being dishonest about a student's grades.
Yeah.
Those types of dishonesty.
Yeah. If there were points under it that this is the.
That's what I meant by context.
But you can't.
You can't cover all of them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any further level of specificity that you would like to see that we can work toward?
I also wonder if maybe we just need a work session on this. I don't know if that is necessary or not. I mean, I do think that, one of the primary roles of the board is we are a policy-making body. And so if it becomes useful to you, Dr. Winston, and your team to have that kind of working session input from the board, I think that may be something that we can work toward if there are just more questions and things that potentially need to be discussed at some point.
One of the things I would just kind of redirect everyone to is the opening paragraph of the policy. The last part of it really speaks to consistent with the educational mission of the Monroe County Community School Corporation. That therein implies within the context of one's employment, within their role as an administrator, while they are working. So I think that's probably the safest way to assume and understand, and I don't want to use the word assume, but to understand, but I do appreciate the desire to have additional context as to where this policy would apply, and I think we can absolutely address those concerns that have been raised, but I think perhaps that sentence helps one to potentially think through within the educational mission, and our mission is to educate children. And so thinking along those lines, if someone hits their finger with a hammer in their home or neighborhood or out and about, that's not within the mission of MCCSC. But I do think the use of inappropriate language in a classroom, supporting children instructionally, that does raise a level of concern about one's ethical approach and professional standards and conduct, given our role of educating children. So I just wanted to kind of give that as a consideration, and if that's the level of specificity that is requested, we can certainly address that. And I would probably just want to kind of wrap up by even asking Attorney DeWeese to perhaps provide some additional guidance to us around the level of specificity that you would suggest for this type of a policy. Generally speaking, you don't want to box our employees in tightly. You want to have enough flexibility that it can be applied appropriately. I do appreciate the concern about different administration, and hopefully that won't be anytime soon. But a different administration perhaps could apply it, and we don't want there to be any misunderstanding about the intent and our utilization of these policies. So, Attorney DeWeese, could you provide some guidance to us as well?
I think I think that for my preference in policy, I think the time when you run into trouble with policy is when there are things implied rather than being explicit, or when we when we think things are obvious and everyone might assume the same thing, but then when we end up, I'm just going to be transparent and say I'm thinking like a lawyer here. When we end up having to fight about what a law means, it's because whatever it was in there wasn't explicit or it was implied, and it turned out everyone didn't have the same understanding. So I think the more we can make the implicit explicit, the better. I am inclined to agree with Brandon that I don't love the list of bullets because I think it implies a level of disambiguity, is that, let's go with that. It makes it seem like it's not ambiguous, but there is just no way that there is no subjectivity in something like this. The line that sticks out to me, Dr. Winston, is the one that says behavior inconsistent with the MCCSC's expectations reflects poorly on an employee's fitness to serve as a role model and is strictly prohibited. So the way I read this is that behavior inconsistent with MCCSC's expectation is strictly prohibited. And so the definition then that would be helpful to me is what are MCCSC's expectations. Then if we were charged with reviewing an instance in which someone had been dismissed under this policy, I think, and this would be helpful to understand, Kay, if I'm wrong, is whether or not someone acted inconsistently with MCCSC's expectations. If that's what we might be charged with reviewing, then that definition would be helpful.
I think that the expectations are actually listed here, although I hear what you're saying. But here it says the school board expects all employees to maintain high standards in their working relationships, provide leadership in the corporation and community, and in the performance of their duties too, A through I, right? So I think that part is clear.
Yeah.
But I do think the morals of the community is ambiguous. That, and although if they were linked out to say, I do agree with the morals of the community, but I do think that in terms of what the expectation is.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think
That's
you're
A
right.
through
That if A through I fits that definition of what MCCSC's expectations are, then I don't, in my opinion, 1 through 16 don't add anything, but perhaps create more confusion. But again, that's just what I'm thinking right now.
Anyone else have any additional context for me? If not, thank you. We will take this back to the drawing board and we will work on it and bring it forward for further consideration. Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Winston.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear because I feel like I'm the party pooper a lot, so I just want to make sure that the staff knows that like I appreciate your hard work. It's not that I don't appreciate it and don't think that what you're all doing is great. I do feel like it is our responsibility as a board, though, as we pass things to have questions. And I know that there's times of lots of questions and times of none. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not questioning you all because I don't appreciate you and appreciate the work you're doing and think you're doing a great job. But I also feel like that is our main role as board officers. So to the community and to you all, I do appreciate. I've got 3 kids in the school, 2 only actually. 2 in the school district now, and 3 that went through. And I appreciate everyone that's done everything they can to make that happen. I met a vice principal at North that I had 2 kids go to North, and I have never met this vice principal. I guess he said that's a good thing that I haven't, but I appreciate all the work of people who we don't even know or see on a daily basis that they're making these spaces for our children. Wonderful places so they can move on into other places of life. So I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The question is just the way that I show my love. So that means I love all of you. Thank you very much. But it's just the way that I think. So I just want to be clear, and I think the board knows this. I'm not trying to do this to stick it to anybody at all.
No, and Brandon, I appreciate that. I appreciate that comment, that note. I also think that so many of us are so conditioned to think that any amount of questioning or conflict is a bad or a negative thing. I think there are healthy ways to have conflict and discussion. I think those things are important. And I think that anyone who knows you understands that it's only in service of the district and ensuring that we are as strong as we can be collectively. So, I think it's absolutely okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I would just like to say thank you, Board Member Scher. Please know that my team and we appreciate the feedback. I think you are beginning to know me well enough to know that I welcome feedback because I think we all get better as a result of that. And so in no way, shape, or form do I receive your feedback as anything other than supportive and an opportunity for us to be better. So thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. And yes, Erin.
I think the word I was looking for was unambiguous.
Yes. I did say it after, like quietly, but all these in the moment. Sometimes you're like the words just sort of you
Now
know.
it's gonna haunt me if I didn't.
No,
give
it's fine.
vouchers.
Unambiguous. I get it. Oh, wow. Okay. So we're going to move on to the personnel report. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion, Ross and Tiana, second, and Dr. Henderson.
President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and members of the Board of School Trustees, this evening I would like to call to your attention the following administrative appointments and retirements. Andrea Smith for Administrator as an Assistant Director at Hoosier Hills Career Center. Mrs. Smith continues with MCCSC after serving the corporation for 14 and a half years as a full-time employee, although she started earlier than that as a coach, in a variety of capacities. Most recently as the Pathways and Remediation Coordinator at Hoosier Hills Career Center. Andrea holds a master's degree in educational leadership from Indiana University. We have an administrative retirement to announce. Lisa Quigley, who is the assistant principal at Highland Park Elementary School. Mrs. Quigley has been serving the students of MCCSC for 36 years, most recently as the assistant principal at Highland Park. We have 2 certified staff retirements to announce. Mr. Donald Adams. Mr. Adams has been serving the students of MCCSC for 19 and a half years, most recently serving as a social studies teacher at Bloomington High School North, a position which I hired him for 19 and a half years ago. Also, Demita Hassler. Mrs. Hassler has been serving the students of MCCSC for 25 and a half years, most recently serving as a 3rd grade teacher at Templeton Elementary School. On behalf of MCCSC, I would like to extend a special thank you to these retirees for their many years of dedicated service to the students that we serve. At this time, I request that you please approve the recommendations as presented in your board packet in the personnel report.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Do we have any comments from the board?
Me.
Yes.
I know.
Okay.
I just had to give a shout out to Mrs. Quigley. She's amazing, and I'm so sad and happy for her and us at the same time. But it's been a real honor to get to have her service my kids and all the kids at Highland Park and work alongside her. She's a really awesome person, and I'm going to miss her a lot.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from the board? All right. All those in favor of the motion to approve the personnel report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We now move to contracts. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts and the 2 quotes as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross, seconded by Ashley, that we approve the contracts and quotes as presented. Mr. Kenny.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, members of the board. There are 9 contracts and 2 quotes before you this evening. I recommend approval of the contracts and awarding of the quotes as presented. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board on any of these? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to approve the contracts and 2 quotes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We will now move to the early learning and out-of-school program fee changes. Do I have a motion to approve the early learning and out-of-school program fee changes as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Brandon and seconded by Ashley that we approve the early learning and out-of-school program fee changes as presented. Dr. Dowling.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and members of the School Board of Trustees. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about early learning and out-of-school programs fee and tuition changes. First, I want to start by reminding the community of the programs that we offer. We have our infant program, which is for children 6 weeks to 12 months. We have our toddler program for children 12 months to 36 months. We have our 3-year-old preschool program for those who are 3 by August 1st of the school year. Our 4-year-old pre-K program for those who are 4 by August 1st of the school year. We have our extended day program, which is our before and after care school program serving families with students in preschool through 6th grade. And then we have Adventure Camp, which is our summer camp serving families with students in pre-K, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, through 6th grade. We also have a program for 7th and 8th graders at Adventure Camp who are counselors in training, so that is part of our program as well. First, I'd like to talk about recommendations for infant, toddler, and 3-year-old preschool changes. The reason that we're recommending these changes is to ensure that our fees are equitable across our early learning programs. I will talk about when I show a chart on the next page. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we also want to make sure that our fees are in alignment with our area providers. Just a little history. Before I get into the recommended changes, I do want to highlight, though, we are not recommending any changes to our pre-K program. Those fees will stay the same. Our tuition support for families will stay the same. Again, because of the 2023 Family and Community Focus Referendum, we have tuition support for all families for our pre-K program, and there will be no recommended changes for that. We look forward to continuing to enroll families for next year, and I'll talk about some enrollment days at the end of my presentation. But turning to my recommended changes in early learning fees, these only apply to our centers. That would be the Early Learning Center and Hoosier Hills Child Care Center. There won't be any recommendation to changes for our 3-year-old preschool program at our elementary sites. So the changes are recommending that we change the monthly fee for infant care from $1,100 a month to $1,150 a month, from toddler care from $1,000 to $1,100, and then for our 3-year-old preschool program at our centers, that's the Early Learning Center in Hoosier Hills, we're recommending a change from $900 to $1,000. And we are again leaving our school-based, that is the elementary school-based preschool, 3-year-old preschool program at $800. The reason we're recommending the change, particularly for the 3-year-old preschool program at our centers, is we believe it's more equitable in alignment with our elementary-based fee of $800. That $800 covers the school day, but there might be additional fees for families. It might be for breakfast and lunch, before care or after care extended day program, whereas our fee at our centers at ELC and Hoosier Hills Child Care Center, that $1,000 is an 11-hour day, so there's just already covers before and after care and already covers meals. So by making this recommendation, we feel like this is a more equitable approach for our families. Turning to our extended day program, the reasoning behind the recommended change is that we want to have alignment with our morning and afternoon programs and across our building, across the district. Right now we have different fees for our morning and afternoon programs, and we have different fees at our afternoon programs depending on which site your child might be at. We believe that going to one standardized fee is more equitable and is easier to communicate with our family, our families in our community. I also want to remind the community that our 21st Century Community Learners Grant, which we have, we will continue to use that to fund the fees for children who are eligible for the federal free or reduced meals program. We will continue to offer extended day for free for a significant number of families in our community, thanks to that grant. This is the history of extended day fees. It's quite a chart, but you can see it was $7.75 for the morning and $8.75 in the afternoon. And then when we went to a tiered system, the morning program stayed at $7.75, but we went to $7.25 and $8.75 depending on building location. So you can see that the final column of chart makes it $8 in the morning, $8 in the afternoon, same price, all school locations. And again, we believe that is a more equitable approach and an easier approach to communicate with our families in our community. Finally, to talk about Adventure Camp. This would be the first change in Adventure Camp tuition since 2018, probably longer than that. We were trying to figure out if there's ever been a price change, but we know at least since 2018, the fee has been $75. Since then, we've had substantial wages and material cost increases due to inflation. We also are happy to announce that we'll be expanding our programming in Adventure Camp. We'll be adding pre-K to our programming. We're going to have 2 full-time classrooms and 1 half-time classroom to have options for families. We believe this is in alignment with our commitment to the community to expand our early learning opportunities for families. Another additional thing that we will be adding is traditionally we've had 3 2-week sessions. We're now going to be adding a 4th 2-week session to provide even more coverage and support and opportunities for both children and support for families. This chart here, you can see that Adventure Camp has been $75 at least since 2018, and our recommendation is to move it to $100 a week starting this summer. I will also remind the community that we have scholarships available for families. A significant number of children who attend Adventure Camp are on scholarships, and we will continue to be able to offer those opportunities so that all families will have an opportunity to attend Adventure Camp. I wanted to talk about some enrollment dates for our programs. Our 3-year-old preschool program, we will start enrolling very soon. That'll be February 3rd. We're really excited about that. This will be a great opportunity. This is the year where we're expanding our preschool opportunities based on the 2023 Family Community Focused Referendum. We will be offering preschool for income eligible families at a lot of our locations, so we're really excited about getting that enrollment started. Our infant and toddler re-enrollment at our centers will start February 24th, Adventure Camp will start enrolling March 3rd, and our 4-year-old pre-K program will start enrolling March 10th, and finally Extended Day for next school year will start enrolling April 7th. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Yeah, no, you're good? All right. Okay, then we will move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the early learning and out-of-school program fee changes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next for our consideration is the recommendation to adopt Resolution 2025-03, transferring amounts for the education fund to the operations fund. Do I have a motion to adopt this as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we adopt Resolution 2025-03 as presented. Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. This resolution is required annually by State of Indiana statute. It authorizes the transfer of amounts from the Education Fund to the Operations Fund in calendar year 2025. In 2018, the State of Indiana had school districts set up 2 new funds, the Education Fund and the Operations Fund under Indiana Code. The Education Fund is set up for the payment of expenses allocated to student instruction and learning. The Operations Fund is for the payment of expenses not allocated to student instruction and learning. Indiana Code requires the distribution of tuition support to be received into the Education Fund. The transfer of an amount not to exceed $15 million from the Education Fund to the Operations Fund is to reimburse the Operations Fund for expenses that are not allocated to student instruction and learning for the 2025 calendar year. I recommend approval of Resolution 2025-03 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Any comments from the board? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2025-03, transferring amounts for the Education Fund to the Operations Fund as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next for our consideration is to amend previously approved school calendars for the 2024-2025, 2025-2026, and 2026-2027 school years. Do I have a motion to approve the changes to the 3 school calendars as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Oh, okay. It was moved by Ashley, seconded by Tiana, that we approved to amend the school calendars for the years listed. Dr. Winston.
Thank you very much. So, as everyone knows, on January 6th of this year, our school corporation was closed due to inclement weather and a county-wide travel warning. As we were scheduled to return to school following a 2-winter break. However, due to the winter storm, the county-wide travel warning, and the uncertainty of additional circumstances that were well beyond our control, the administration decided to close schools on that day. The state of Indiana requires public schools to operate for a total of 180 instructional days each school year. As a result, MCCSC is legally obligated to make up the lost instructional day from January 6th. So the recommendation, I am recommending that we make a modification and amendment to the 2024-2025 school calendar, and in addition, within that amendment, that we add 2 additional snow makeup days in the event that we have any additional snow days that come forth. I'm not hoping for that, but in the event that we do, I want to be prepared. Currently, we are scheduled to not have school on Monday, February 17th for President's Day. And presently, we are scheduled to have our last student day on Thursday, May 22nd. The recommendation to make up for January 6th that we would use February 17th as a snow makeup day. And in the event that we would have an additional weather-related day, that we would designate Friday, May 23rd as an alternative snow makeup day, only if necessary. This impact is as follows. So Monday, February 17th would become an instructional day to replace January 6th. The last day of school for students would become Friday, May 23rd in the event that an additional snow day would occur. And then the third aspect of that is it would change the teacher record day to Tuesday, May 27th. If this recommendation is approved, it will apply to the 2024-2025 school year, and we would make the same changes to the 25-26 and the 26-27 calendar years.
So there's possibility that teachers would have to go the day after Labor Day or after Memorial Day. Is that okay?
It is not preferable.
No, I
but
know.
Yes.
I know. It's just thinking.
And this is only in the event that we would have a true snow day and not an e-learning day.
That is correct.
Is there still opportunity to? I feel like maybe there's conversation about talking to the state to. Is that not a possibility? I'm guessing that's not a
They're not
possibility.
making that provision
Okay.
available.
Of course not.
You're busy doing other stuff right now.
Yeah, I suppose they're busy in legislature right now, so. Okay. Do we have any comments from the board?
Out of curiosity, how many more e-learning days could we have if needed? Is there a number?
I think we can still do one more. I'm
We-
looking to my team to
we-
verify two more. We can do two more, Alexis?
Correct.
Okay.
The state provides the opportunity for up to 3 asynchronous learning days. They do not limit the number of synchronous learning days.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
And we've had one of each?
Yes, we've had
Mhm.
one e-learning synchronous day, one e-learning asynchronous day, so we've used one of our 3 asynchronous days.
Okay.
Can I just ask, is this something that we foresee in the future to build back in? So
Yes.
That's why these other calendars are on there.
Yes, so for 25-26 and
Oh, I see. I'm
26-27,
sorry, I didn't see that.
we are making a change to those already approved calendars to build this in.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay. Any more questions, Tiana?
So in the future, it's just removing President's Day to have a built-in snow.
As painful as it is, yes.
And we didn't have, am I remembering, we didn't have President's Day off like a couple years ago, right? We always had, I feel like that was a
Generally
built-in.
have President's Day off.
Okay, so that wasn't used as a built-in snow day in the past?
It might have been in the past.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Pre-COVID.
I think the challenge that we have is
In the Wayback Machine, yeah.
the challenge in terms of opportunities are to extend the school year, to reduce fall break from the 2 days that it is, to reduce Thanksgiving break, to reduce winter break, to reduce spring break.
Yeah, I think those are all.
It
less
was
favorable.
my determination and my team that the lesser might be President's Day.
I
And
would
again,
tend
for
to
the
agree.
upcoming calendars, that's a just in case.
That's a just in case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate you looking at the breaks and not choosing any of them.
I mean, the winter break could be one less day, but I don't think that's advisable.
It's also
Why we
to shorten that one. If you don't have a snow day, then because typically snow comes after that. So.
Yeah. Believe me, I looked at every single day on the calendar.
Okay. More comments or questions before we move to vote? Okay. Well, then, all those in favor of the motion to approve the amendment to the school calendar for the 2024-2025 year and the 2025-2026 year and the 2026-2027 school years, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay. I had a moment of confusion, but now it looks like we are considering the approval of the 2027-2028 school year calendar.
Yes, correct.
Okay. It just like threw my brain for a minute. I was like, didn't I just do this? No, it's a different year. Do I have a motion to approve the 2027-2028 school year calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Ashley, seconded by Ross, that we approve the 2027-2028 school year calendar as presented. Dr. Winston.
I have no further comments. We would apply the same logic to the 27-28 calendar and include 2 potential snow days only to be utilized if needed.
Okay. Any questions or comments? None? All those in favor of the motion to approve the 2027-2028 school calendar, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Abstentions? The motion carries. Dr. Winston, will you introduce tonight's presentation on diversity goal number 2, which is student discipline disparity?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So, very excited. We have spent a lot of time, our teams have worked tirelessly over the last several years to really get a better handle on our discipline and looking at the disparities that we identified a few years ago. I'm encouraged by the hard work of our school teams. They have worked very hard and very diligently to examine our policies, our practices, our procedures, our protocols. You're going to hear a little bit more information tonight about all of the coordination of the strategies that are being put in place. And we are pleased to share some encouraging data and information, but I would also say that we are not there yet, but we've made great strides, and I'm very excited for Mrs. Harmon to share this information with you. Mrs. Harmon?
Thank you so much, Board President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and members of the board for allowing me to present. I opted to move over here to the podium because I will be joined partially with Dr. Finley as well tonight. Some of the work kind of shows how the work of doing this expands across departments and across areas, and so we wanted to be able to highlight that tonight too. So he'll be joining me up here at the podium at some point as well. So go ahead to begin. Just a reminder that it's diversity goal 2, which is to decrease discipline disparities between student populations. And there were 2 outcomes related to that: identify and reduce discipline disparity and reduce exclusionary practices. We always like to start by reminding everyone of the definition of educational equity that we use to found our work in our schools. So it is when educational policies, practices, interactions, and resources are representative of, constructed by, and responsive to all people so that each person has access to, meaningfully participates in, and has high outcomes from high quality learning experiences regardless of individual characteristics and group membership. So a little bit about our journey and where we are. So this is our safe and inclusive schools model, with thinking about equitable discipline practices in the middle, and then they are supported by our flower petals, if you will, here in the graphic. Those are restorative practices, progressive discipline, positive behavior intervention and support, professional learning about culturally responsive practices, a focus on mental well-being, and student-centered support guide. I'm going to pause here and define a couple of these, not all of them, but a few that are probably good for a base understanding of what we're talking about. So when we talk about restorative practices, this is a practice used to help build relationships and strengthen community while addressing problems when they arise. When there is a conflict of harm, restorative practices provide a structured approach to openly discuss the situation, find solutions, create a space where everyone involved can share their thoughts and feelings, understand what went wrong, and work together to repair harm and make things better, and decisions about that. One of the other terms we wanted to define was progressive discipline. It's a tiered system of discipline where the lowest level is considered first, followed by progressively more intensive consequences based on severity, age, and repetition of behavior. It prioritizes, again, those restorative practices, accountability, and proportionate consequences to maintain a safe and inclusive learning environment. And finally, we wanted to define positive behavior intervention and support. You may hear this referred to as PBIS. And it's an evidence-based tiered framework for supporting students' behavioral, academic, social, emotional, and mental health. And when implemented with fidelity, it improves social emotional competence, academic success, and school climate. It also improves teacher health and well-being. It's a way to create positive, predictable, equitable, and safe learning environments where everyone thrives. So again, those three things come into concert with the other three to kind of inform our equitable discipline practices. As we've done this work, this journey, it's been 2021 to 2025, year 1 through year 4, and so we can see this is a list of all of the things that have been done, much of the work. I won't read them all to you. We can see kind of we're now currently in year 4. Those check marks are like the things we know, we confidently can say, yep, we checked them off. And we've done them. That doesn't mean we're done with them. We might still be doing those things. And then we're still working on the 4 bullets down there at the bottom. I'd really like to highlight that this year we released our MCCSC Student Support Guide with an accompanying administrator reference guide, and that we have been doing restorative practices throughout training for our staff throughout these 4 years, as well, as highlighting we'll speak more in the presentation about some of these things as well, so I'll move on. In doing this work, we've established safe and inclusive school work groups. These are made up of counselors, social workers, assistant principals, school psychologists, behavior specialists, about over 80 people coming together to do this work together to create the student-centered handbook and develop safe and inclusive schools professional learning for all MCCSC staff. When we look at what we have done over these 4 years with positive behavior interventions and support, we've had professional learning to facilitate a common set of practices and understanding across the corporation. We're currently looking at that work right now in teams throughout our district as well. And we want them to be reflective of our students within our schools. Those things are created at each school site, so it's reflective of that school environment as well. We align our school-wide expectations with our corporation-wide expectations so that there's consistency across all of that. We can create a transparent violation system as well, and talk about what are the adult expectations in this as well. And ultimately, we want to deepen our understanding and application of culturally responsive PBIS practices through this work. These are some of the staff professional learning that we've engaged in over the few years in developing this work as well. I spoke to the Safe and Inclusive Schools model. We've had book studies. This is one up here. And we've partnered with the Midwest Equity and Plains Assistance Center for much of this work too. And they've helped us with creating safe and inclusive schools. You heard about this last month. Dr. Finley did speak about our mental health and wellness partnerships, but we wanted to highlight it here again to kind of speak as well about how this work connects with each other and how we see each of these goals supporting each other and coming together. So just again, reminding you that we have mental health partnerships in all of our schools, that we implement trauma-informed care, we've expanded social work services, and we've implemented a comprehensive school counseling framework, which ultimately talks about how the aspects of counseling are the responsibility of everyone in that building and thinks about the things that need to happen. In terms of our restorative practices, professional learning, just kind of by the numbers of what we've done, we've broken our school staff into 2 cohorts for restorative practices. We have 35 restorative practice trainers have completed 4 full days of training. 100% of all of our educators have received at least the introductory information on restorative practices. And as of right now, we have 696 educators who have received the full day of training. All of our cohort 1 schools have completed the full training module and now are in a stage where they're just training new hires and doing kind of refreshers on what are the practices and how do we come around these as a school community. And our cohort 2 schools will be in that same state at the end of this year. So right now they're completing their trainings this spring 2025. And so by next year for restorative practices, we'll really just be focused on new teachers, new hire, onboarding, training, and then again, continued practices in the buildings just to make sure that we're always thinking about that practice as professionals. Ultimately, one of the things that all of this work led to was a comprehensive student support guide for all schools. It's the same student support guide no matter where you are. It has consistent corporation-wide. It's student-centered, it's culturally responsive, and it's grounded in those PBIS and restorative practices that we spoke of. It has an accompanying administrator reference guide so that there's some consistency about the guidance and practices in implementing the student support guide. Along with this work has come our anti-racism policy 5518. We had a training related to that so we can ensure that all of our employees understand what that policy is, what right it affords students, what rights it affords them, and how to follow it. And at this point in time, or when I made this PowerPoint, so a couple days ago, 2000, I made the PowerPoint more than just a couple days ago, but the number was entered. Yeah. It's been a work in process. 2,136 employees have been trained on our anti-racism policy. We created that in-house. And then we are currently developing a similar training for our Equity Center, Sexual Identity and Gender Inclusive Policy 5519. We'll release that this fall, and all employees will have access to that and begin completing that one as well. We're really proud of that work. And along with that, one of the aspects of the anti-racism policy was that there would be a semi-annual report. This is where I turn it over to Dr. Finley to do his part of the presentation.
President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, members of the board, per policy 5518, the anti-racism policy, we are going to present a semi-annual report. The Board of School Trustees shall receive semi-annual reports on racial harassment and discrimination incidents, including incident response timelines and disciplinary action taken. So I'm going to jump right into the data here. And this is from August 2024 to December of 2024. We had 17 total confirmed incidents of racial harassment and discrimination within our schools, 9 at the elementary level, 8 at the secondary level. And I want to highlight sort of the process as these incidents come in. The incidents reported to a trusted adult or through the Stop It app. And we've done a lot of work to make sure we're promoting that app as well. So they have many avenues to report any incidents of bias. The report is reviewed by building and district administration. I think that's important. We bolded that just to make sure that everyone knows there are a lot of eyes on the information coming in. We're watching it closely. So everyone in the district has been involved with this process. An investigation is conducted immediately if substantiated regular disciplinary procedures are followed, and that's within the student support manual that we've created. And all students involved are referred to building social worker or counselors for additional support. And one of the things we know is typically harassment and bias incidents are likely to be underreported. So one of our goals is to increase reporting, increase our students' ability to come to trusted adults, to use the app and make sure that the incidents are addressed. So we raise awareness and identifying racial discrimination, all of the work prior that Alexis has talked about. It's all gone into this work. And we've increased opportunities for positive adult-student relationships. That connection is important. So many important adults in our buildings, from social workers, counselors, teachers, the principals, assistant principals, so many people working with our students. We want to make sure that there's those connections and they feel comfortable coming to adults. And we also increased awareness with the Stop It app and access to the trusted adults in the school. One of the things that we felt was really important is increasing student voice. The Equity Ambassador Group was great last spring, and they helped a lot with identifying ways to promote the Stop It app and also some things that they added within the Stop It app that we were able to customize based on the feedback they gave us. 35% of the reports that came in came from the Stop It app, 65 came from the trusted adults, and that's what we want. We have so many good people in the buildings, and we want those students talking to the adults, but if that opportunity is not there, the Stop It app is available as well. And then of the 17 incidents that occurred, counseling support for all 17 incidents was provided. Additional targeted counseling support for students who have been harmed was also included, and that's the important piece. And I wrote a few things down here. Students who have been affected by bias or harassment. And I think one of the things that we have to do is have that immediate intervention. So we talk about the timeline in any one of these incidents. It's immediate, and we respond, and school administrators act swiftly to investigate, stop the behavior, and provide support as needed. The counseling and mental health services are there. We do have social workers in each building. We have counselors at the secondary level as well. And then we work hard to educate the broader community. We've done so many things with the Learning for Justice curriculum, Second Steps, the Responding to Bias resources from the Anti-Defamation League. There's so many good resources out there. All the schools have been trained in safe and inclusive schools. And then one of the things that we really wanted to make sure with students who have been harmed is that they feel this sense of advocacy. We have adults in the building that are there to support them and make sure that their voice is heard, and that we're taking their responses seriously, and we're moving forward, and including not only our support as adults, but then also trying to find ways to build a support network for the students. So there's a lot of things that we do, and I wrote a few of them down here. The Equity Ambassador Group as an example, different affinity groups in the schools, mentors, community organizations that provide additional guidance and a sense of belonging for students, which we know is so important. BGS is starting a 1 in 5 peer support group. Bloomington South has a Black culture group, and one of our school resource officers, our social worker that works with the school resource officers, is mentoring in that group. Troy Thomas, one of our school resource officers, also has a circle group. There's a lot of good things happening, and just making sure students are connected. And we know in the greater Bloomington community as well, NAACP and the local chapter does have youth involvement. The city of Bloomington has the Black Male Youth Summit and Young Women's Leadership Summit. We just want to make sure our students have this support and understand there's a whole community out here supporting all of our kids. Ultimately, the key is a holistic, student-centered approach that prioritizes student safety, well-being, and the ability to thrive despite any challenges they may be facing. And it is important to note that, there were 3 incidents that resulted in out-of-school suspension, 3 that resulted in in-school suspension. Some of these incidents are contextual. There may have been more involved in the incident. And then I think one of the most important pieces is there were 0 repeat offenders, and I think that's the key in all of this. I think, one of the greatest things that we do in schools, we have this opportunity to help our students get it right, those teachable moments, and teaching respect, teaching empathy, making sure that students understand the importance, and we talk about this a lot, the importance of impact versus intent. So a lot of times they say, well, that's not how I meant it. Well, they need to understand how it was received and the impact that it had on others around them. And that's part of recognizing the role that they have in the world around them. So the fact that we haven't had any repeat offenders that have been documented is a great start. And we know that we have a lot of work to do. And I think it's all, and the reason we felt like it was important to present this data within this larger presentation is it's all part of the work that we're doing right now. And we've seen some good progress. Alexis is going to continue with the student discipline data and the discipline disparity. That was work that we started a number of years ago in the schools, and it's exciting to see that data now because we're starting to see some real progress. So I'll turn it back to Alexis.
Thank you, Dr. Finley.
Yeah, and do you have any questions?
No, I'm just saying thank you. Oh, do you want to, should we hold the questions until the end, or do you want to ask it now? Let's hold it till the end. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Finley. So as we look at discipline data review, as we've talked about how this work has impacted what we see. So when we began this goal, we asked ourselves, do disciplinary disparities exist with MCCSC? And they do, right? And we know this because our teams analyze the data using risk ratio metrics, right? So we look at that risk ratio. So it is a ratio of the number of disciplinary events broken down by priority groups and seen when you look at that priority group. and you look at the percentage of the priority group, is the same ratio there or is it greater, right? In 2018 and 19, we selected as our official baseline year due to the pandemic. And our goal was to have a risk ratio of 1.25 or less by the end of the 24-25 school year. That means, well, let's take a look at it here. So here's our risk ratio key as we start to look at this data. I would like to say that this slide here and the numbers on it are examples only. This is not real data. This is just designed to show you how to read the table, and we'll look at the table with the real data in just a second, okay? So along in that left-hand column, it says group name. When you see it for real, it'll tell you what the group is. And then there are 3 categories: in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and expulsions, okay? You'll see on the left is the 18-19 number and then the 23-24 number. And so that's our baseline and then what it currently is. Again, these are fake numbers right now. They don't apply. But if the box is red, it means that the risk ratio is over our benchmark, or our desired, not our benchmark, I'm sorry, our goal of 1.25, right? If it's yellow, it's kind of within range of 1.26 or 2.0. And if it's green, it's 1.25. It's hit that goal that we had or is below it. And then next to those numbers, there are little arrows. If it's a downward pointing green arrow, it means it has gone down. That risk ratio has gone down since 2018, 2019. And if it's red and pointing up, it means that risk ratio has gone up since 2018, 19. Some things to consider before we enter and look at the data. We have worked hard to reduce exclusionary practices, right? And expulsion is exclusionary. It removes students from the school environment and from the learning environment, and we want students in school learning, right? So in some of this work, so we have less expulsions in 23-24 than we did in 2018-19. That means these groups of students are smaller, right? And so in some cases, when we start to break those numbers down by priority groups, not just in expulsion, but in school suspension and out-of-school suspension too, these are really small groups of students, right, that are in a priority group, that are in an out-of-school suspension. And so those numbers can fluctuate greatly year to year based on one incident. And especially with expulsion, there are certain behaviors that by state law students must be expelled by, so that's important to note too. So other things that will impact risk ratio, enrollment trends as well, how with the enrollment as the school as a whole, and again that decrease in expulsion and out of school suspensions. Our goal is to keep students in school. So really, we're gonna train and preference and use restorative practices and those things to ensure students can stay in the school environment as much as possible. Okay, now we're actually gonna look at real data. This is not real data. Say this example again. All right. Here's our risk ratio based with a breakdown on race and ethnicity. So you will see if you look at the row that says white, all of those are ones because that's our baseline data. We're trying to see if in these priority groups, are they more likely or less likely to be suspended either in school or out of school or have an expulsion. So if the risk ratio is below 1, they're less likely. If it's above 1, they are more likely. Make sense? Okay. It's a lot of data, a lot of information on a slide, and a lot of colors and arrows, for sure. But we can look at it and we can see some places where we can see improvement, and we see certainly places where we really still need to do more work. To talk through one, I'll draw your attention to the second row, where Black or African American students, we can see that we are still above what our goal risk ratio is, which was our goal was 1.25, and we're above that in school suspension, out of school suspension, and expulsion. So we know that there's much more work to be done. But we can also notice that our risk ratio is less in every one of those when we compare 18-19 to 23-24. Also note that in the final column for expulsions, most of those numbers have stars next to them, meaning it's fewer than 10 students. Again, we are not expelling very many students, so those numbers can really are small groups of numbers. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is what the breakdown looks like on gender. And our baseline for male is female. Are males more likely to be suspended or expelled? And then the second one, free and reduced lunch, and the baseline being students who have paid lunch. And again, we're above our goal, but again, in some areas we are decreasing and moving the number in the right. And students with disabilities and our English learners. And again, when you have those stars next to it, it's good information, but these could be one or a few students in 1 year. And so we really, that's when we start, we want to look more at trend data over years of time. All right. In kind of conclusion or moving towards conclusion, we always talk to our principals about our strategic plan and the goals that we have and what we want to present on, and we gather information from them. And every time I do, I realize that they say things much better than I would. So I quoted one of our principals' feedback and the next steps that we still have to do for safe and inclusive schools, because they said it so well. So we must continue to consistently monitor discipline data to gain a deeper understanding of our students' behavior and identify effective ways to support their journey toward positive change. It is also crucial to continue supporting our staff, helping them understand and comprehend the underlying reasons for discipline disparities and the impact of exclusionary practices. Additionally, we should continue to promote social and emotional learning for both staff and students. We'll continue to use our safe and inclusive schools model there on the side to do that. In the very final sentiment, in closing, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. That's the work ahead of us. Next month is communication goal number 1. We'll be gathering feedback. If you have any feedback to inform our future strategic plan, please use the QR code. And I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon and Dr. Finley. Ross, you have a question?
Yeah, and one for each of you, actually. Those numbers, as we're looking at the ratios, I know you mentioned small numbers, etc. Have the gross numbers come down, even in cases where the ratios may have gone up?
Certainly. For instance, you know, in 2018-19, we had 33 expulsions, and in 23-24, we had 10 expulsions, and that's district-wide. So you can see that's a right.
So I think sometimes the gross numbers are hidden by percentages or ratios.
That's a good point. Thank you very much.
And then for Dr. Finley, I know when we were talking about the 17 cases reported, were those all student to student? Was there adult to student? Was there student to adult in any of those instances?
That's a great question. All of those were student to student, and we're monitoring all of that. If there are any incidents of adults to students and students to adults.
So there were none of those?
There were none. No.
Great.
Not during this first semester.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I will just say that I'm so glad to see this work. When I ran for the first time, this was one of my primary points on my platform. It was really important to me that we begin to track this, because I think often, well, as James Baldwin said, so I can't say it any better than that, right? If it's not faced, we can't change it. And I do think that students in these sort of more vulnerable and priority populations are often, in this sort of paradoxical way, both invisible in many ways and then hypervisible in other ways. And it results in a lot of the disparity that we've seen. So I'm really glad to see us doing this work and just, you know, being accountable to ourselves and to the community. I think it's an important conversation to have, and that, you know, I think, yeah, anyways, it's great work, and I just love to see us continue doing it.
Thank you so much, President Hennessy. You mentioning that also kind of reminded me that I wanted to point out that we don't really have a guide in this work. This is not data that other districts anywhere in the nation are really putting in front of the public and talking about and really addressing. So it's been exciting work, but, you know, I think we'll see it continue to change and grow and morph as we, you know, Ross, your point to what kinds of numbers we should look at and how it kind of tells a whole picture too is an important one as we continue to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think our numbers on the reported incidents will ever be zero, right? Because that is part of what happens in any kind of space. But I think the fact that we're tracking them, that we're addressing them immediately, that we're providing support for students who have been impacted by them, I think that is the important work, right? So thank you to all of you doing this work in all of your buildings every single day. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Okay, tonight we have a new segment of our meeting that provides our community with a short yet important update on the current Indiana legislative session. Dr. Winston.
Thank you, President Hennessy. The legislative session began the first full week of January, and to date, approximately 1,232 bills have been introduced here in the state of Indiana. The content of these bills is wide-ranging, and many of them will have a direct impact on public education as we now know it. The Indiana School Boards Association is individually tracking about 200 bills. The education-specific topics are wide-ranging and include various education matters, teacher compensation, property taxes, school board elections, and several other items that will have a significant and, in some instances, drastic impact on the fiscal operations of all school districts and corporations throughout the state of Indiana. As a result, each month during this legislative session, from now through the end of April, our legislative liaison, Board Member Ashley Pirani, will highlight a few key bills that are being discussed at the State House so that our community can be well informed and aware of the implications of these bills. We urge you, we implore you to pay close attention and to make your voices heard. Board Member Pirani will now share a few highlights of what's transpired these first few weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Winston. Can't talk. That's not great to start. So as Dr. Winston said, there is no short stature of bills to go through. It's almost 20% of them are education related. So that's been fun. So I appreciate that we have some folks that are doing tracking to whittle down things that are distractions versus things we need to pay attention to. This is a report from, it would be week 3. We are now 3 weeks into the budget session for the Indiana General Assembly. This update is so that you are all aware of some significant bills and the impacts they could have to the K through 12 education policy, governance, and funding. What happens at the State House directly impacts our school districts, our schools, and educational opportunities for our students. The top 3 that ISBA is recommending for us to keep an eye on at the State House are House Bill 1001. This is the governor's bill for the state budget, which will increase the state tuition support by 2%. This is considered a good starting point. However, it's a lengthy process. The ISBA and other K through 12 organizations are going to be lobbying for an increase of at least 2.6%. Then we have 2 bills that are very similar, one in the House and one in the Senate, House Bill 1230 and Senate Bill 287, which would move to make school board elections partisan. SB 287 calls for the addition of a primary for a primary election process for school board candidates and party affiliation. House Bill 1002 is a major deregulation bill, which is good as a remover, obsolete, as it good as it removes I was like, obsolete stateless, unfunded mandates and many provisions to return to local control and decision making through home rule control. SB 146 set new teacher pay goals and addresses parental leave for teachers. In terms of a call to action from ISBA, they are calling on us to oppose Senate Bill 287 and 1230 because school board members in Indiana should be chosen on the basis of qualifications, merits, and platform and not their political affiliation. We are not immune from political conflict here on school boards, but partisan school board elections could have unintended consequences of further fueling such conflicts by instilling division, discord, and fragmentation. The vast majority of school board business does not require a political skill set. There are many K through 12 education bills that ISBA is tracking. Dr. Winston already gave you an idea of how many of those we have so far. As always, those lists will whittle down as things don't make it out of committee or get heard, those sorts of things. The third reading deadline for bills in the present chamber is February 20th. Bills have to pass this deadline in order to remain eligible for passage by the end of session, which is scheduled to end on April 29th of this year. In closing, ISBA has provided us with the tools to identify our area legislators and contact information with emails and phone numbers for each legislator for use. If you would like to know more about that, you can go to their page and look at legislative services is where you will find that. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Board Member Pirani, for the update tonight, and we'll look forward to receiving those on a monthly basis during this legislative session. Does the board have any comments or reports that they would like to share? No? And yes? Ross? No? Okay. And finally, Dr. Winston, do you have any additional information to share with us tonight?
Yes, I do. In the area of redistricting, I do have a brief update. As a follow-up to our December 2024 board meeting, my administrative team and I have begun preparing next steps for continuing the study and following up on the work that Preston Smith has done. We will be engaging with Mr. Smith in some of our next steps, and I anticipate having a more specific update for you in February. Lilly Scholars. I want to take this time to congratulate 2 of our students as recipients of Monroe County's 2025 Lilly Endowment Community Scholarships. Lilly Scholars are known for their community involvement, academic achievement, character, and leadership. The Lilly Endowment Scholarships may be used for otherwise unreimbursed full tuition, required fees, and a special allocation of up to $900 per year. The special allocation may cover the required books and equipment costs for 4 years of undergraduate study on a full-time basis, leading to a baccalaureate degree at any eligible Indiana public or private nonprofit college or university. Congratulations to Sophia Cryato, a senior from Bloomington South, and Tamana Basil, a senior from Bloomington North, for this tremendous achievement as Monroe County's 2025 Lilly Scholars. Muffins with Marquet. Just a quick reminder, on Friday, January 31st, I will be at Unionville Elementary School for the Muffins with Marquet listening event. I hope those who are able can join us at 9:15 a.m. for a conversation and, of course, a muffin. Community chat. Morgenstern Books and Cafe is gracious enough to host my first community coffee chat on Saturday, February 1st, with members of the community who have already pre-registered. I look forward to my one-on-one time with individuals and appreciate Morgenstern's for allowing space for this event. And I will buy you a cup of coffee. Yes. You just didn't know.
All of them?
Yes.
I think it should be called Mochas with Marquet.
But that's
Just
more
wanna-
expensive.
I know. One mocha with Marquet.
Mocha with-
Apparently Brandon's gonna
Singular.
flip that bill.
Write that down, Karen. Pre-K and kindergarten open house. As you heard this evening, all MCCSC elementary schools will host a pre-K and kindergarten open house on Tuesday, February 11th. Actually, you didn't hear that. I apologize. From 6 to 7 p.m. We encourage families who have children entering pre-K and kindergarten to attend. Again, February 11th from 6 to 7 p.m. at every one of our elementary schools. Parent University. Our next Parent University College Planning 101 will be held on Wednesday, February 19th from 6 to 7 p.m. at Bloomington High School North's library. This is one of the most popular parent university events. Attendees will hear from college representatives as they share information about the college admissions review process, college search process, SAT, ACT, financial aid, scholarships, and much more. Advanced registration is appreciated. And last, but certainly not least, School Board Appreciation Month. January is School Board Appreciation Month. I want to personally recognize our amazing school board members for all that they do on behalf of our students, families, and our staff. Our board members devote their time and energy to making important decisions that expand opportunities for all of our students, and we don't often thank them enough for their insight, dedication, compassion, commitment, knowledge, expertise, kindness. Can I keep going? As public servants to this corporation. Please join me in a round of applause for the members of the Monroe County Community School Board of Trustees. We thank you for all of your service and all that you do to make us the #1 destination school corporation in Indiana.
Well, thank you, Dr. Winston, for that. And for all of your work. And thanks to all of you in the room tonight, sitting through this meeting, as always. The next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. And with that, we are adjourned.
Hey, you can make it. How far? Oh.
I like that.
Yeah, it might.